Welcome back to Grace Stories. This is Garrett, and we're just so glad that you're joining us again. We've been getting a lot of good responses from these. If you haven't heard the one with Rod and Cindy in this very room, we did that a while back, and I would highly encourage you to go back and look at it. And also, before we even start, if you're not subscribed, I would really encourage you to subscribe. If you don't have a YouTube account, maybe you have a Gmail account, maybe you can make a YouTube account. If you're wanting to see some of the things that we're doing that maybe are a little bit longer, maybe they're not as much of announcements, a lot of that stuff might end up on YouTube more so than anywhere else like Facebook or Instagram. And so I just really encourage you to subscribe. And also if you're, watching the sermons online and you're subscribed, they're going to show up there as well. And you're going to see our worship services on Sunday. So thank you for the people that have subscribed, push notifications, all of that stuff. And thank you to the people that are doing it right now, because I know that you will. I trust that you will.
Obey Jarrett. Obey Garrett.
And with all of that said, this week I thought it might be interesting to talk about the book that we have been paired with our sermon series. It's called Enthroned. A lot of you may have it. And I figured this week we could talk about what led to it, what it was like, some of the story behind the book. And this may motivate some of you that haven't gotten it to maybe go ahead and get this. And so I have with me the people that their names are on the cover, Rod and Jared. And one of the first questions, and you can both, I'm sure you have different perspectives on this, but what was the motivation? What kind of inspired you or spurred you to write what you did or to put this book out with the sermon series? And it could even be what spurred you guys to think about this sermon series and that.
Well, yeah, I mean, to back up just a little bit, every fall we do a spiritual growth series, and we've done so many different topics over the years, from how to serve the city to, I think many years ago we did the series on 40 Days of Purpose. So every fall we do that, and it's a chance to get people back from the summer, get them on the same page about what our focus is, what our ministry focus is, what our ministry vision is. And for the past few years, it's been things like prayer and gratitude. And so when I was thinking about this upcoming series, I just really felt kind of compelled to make sure we do something on worship, because I feel like God is really growing us as a congregation. Jared has been doing an amazing job moving our congregation into a place where I think we're encountering the presence of God in some really fresh ways. And so this seemed like a great time to do a series on worship.
Mm. So we tend to do different things. We'll have series maybe where we're talking about a book of the Bible, and then we have some of these in the fall where it's maybe a little more topical.
Right.
And so the decision was made to talk about worship. Now, what inspired the idea of this as a material to go along with the series? And in the past, we have done different things, whether it's maybe questions that go along with it, CDs, notebooks. There's been some precedent for things like that, but a book that is not just a series of questions or something like that. It's a lot different.
Yeah, I mean, I got a call from a friend of mine who was new in the publishing business, and he contacted me about the possibility of publishing through their new publishing company. And he had done this in such a way that that we could take content, upload it to their website, and it was just an amazing system. And so I thought, okay, so we will experiment with this, and we will take the messages for the fall series. We'll create a book. And so one day I went into Jared's office and I said, hey, what would you think about us doing a book in preparation for the fall series? No big deal. And so we had a great time talking about it and batted that around. I don't know how you felt when I came in and talked about that, but that was kind of a fun conversation.
That was fun. So my personal involvement, I felt like at the beginning of the year that God was like calling me to the discipline of writing. And so I had been writing these devotionals specifically about the difference between worship, when we're gathered as a congregation and when we're just by ourselves. And I didn't really know why I was writing them or what they were for. But I just felt like I was, being obedient. And then Rod came in and said, "Hey, let's talk about a book." And I was like, "Oh, well, maybe this is why."
I realized that when I popped that question, I thought this is going to be a heck of a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of work. And but I knew I had 2 weeks in Seattle where I could put it all together, Lord willing. And that was an interesting 2 weeks because I spent the first week taking the stuff that I had written, and stripping out all the things in there that were like message things and really getting it into a chapter form. And then the second week I realized, okay, I'm going to have to learn how to use this program. And Monday morning, I got up, I'm in Seattle. I'm thinking, okay, here we go. I learned this program. And I think I got it within 3 or 4 hours. And, I'm not like a natural program guy, but the program's pretty good to use. And I felt like it just really flowed. And so it was a far easier process than I envisioned when I first launched into it.
Yeah, and so you referenced a little bit of making this different than just your sermon manuscripts. For people that don't know, I know this, that you write out your sermons, a full manuscript, and there's a word count that usually you're kind of hitting. And for those of you that have actually bought this and delved into the different aspects of it, speak to people who maybe are thinking, well, I can just get the notes on the website, or is this just like the update that they used to put out with the notes section, just bound in a paperback form?
And part of what we wanted to do with this was we wanted to make this so it was highly readable, and it could be read in conjunction with the series, but also, if the series is over and people want to grab the book, they grab the book and get a lot out of it. I think the main thing is we wanted to give people a vision for what does it mean to have a heart for worship and build a lifestyle where worship becomes central and integral to all that we do. And as Jared and I we're talking about titles, I think we bat around a lot of ideas. And tell me why you thought the title Enthroned. I mean, we kind of bat around a lot of ideas, and I think you were the one that settled in on saying, "Boy, I really like that Enthroned title. That really resonates with me."
I really liked it because we talk about, obviously, God is the one that we worship on Sundays, but just through the course of our lives, we place different things, on the metaphorical throne of our hearts, and we're all created worshipers, and so we're worshiping something all the time. And so I just liked that overall idea of who is on the throne of your heart every day, and what does that look like to worship him in all these different kinds of ways. And that's kind of what we get to explore in a lot of different ways, and a lot of the different chapters is worship is more than just music or Sunday morning or something that you do at church. And so I thought it just really kind of encapsulated the whole thing really well.
Yeah. So obviously, if you're picking this up and, knowing that you can engage with this with the sermon, and I think it can bring a different aspect to that and engage people in a way that, in our society, in our culture, I think people are so used to, I worship on Sundays, and then I go home and I work and I get the kids fed, I do homework, whatever. And then I come back and I worship again on Sunday. Maybe if I'm feeling, up to it, I might do it during the week in my small group or like on a Wednesday night service or something like that. And so I think that this challenges that thought process a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you're engaging with this, throughout the week with the sermon, and you can always go back and watch the sermons again and engage with those again. But and maybe you both can speak to this on both aspects. There's also other things in there like the devotionals and things like that. And so, for people who might be thinking either A, I don't necessarily want to go back and watch the sermons again, or B, well, the sermon series is halfway through, is it really worth getting right now? What are some of the other things that this can help challenge people?
So we wanted this to be, basic discipling and mentoring for worship. And so somebody could pick this up and go, okay, so what is God's vision for worship? And we wanted to base it on, the Psalms and on other passages in the Bible. But, to back up a little bit, I'll tell you where my heart for worship comes from. When I first came to Christ in high school, I was invited to a Bible study in Thiensville, Wisconsin. And that Bible study had amazing worship from my 16-year-old mindset. And I can remember there were easy songs to listen to. There were easy songs to remember. They were different than the hymns that I had been used to hearing and singing. I like hymns, but they were different. And I found myself going back to high school, and I'd be walking down the hall, and I'd be singing these songs. And what I realized was that I was learning what it was to be filled with the Holy Spirit, because part of the outflow of the filling of the Holy Spirit is, spontaneously singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. And so I'm thinking, oh, okay, so this is like part of what it means to be filled with the Spirit. And so worship became a big deal for me for the first 3 or 4 years of me being a Christian. So then fast forward to another pivotal time in our lives, we moved to Baltimore. And now there's a whole new iteration of the worship movement. And I'm learning new songs, and those songs were really powerful for me, at that time. And God did a fresh thing in my life during that time. So I've got my high school experience. I got my experience, when we're a family of 6 and we've moved to this new city. And, when Jared came a couple of years ago, I feel like God moved me into a new, place of worship because of just the gifts that God's given to him, the Spirit that he builds into it. And so, part of my hope was that people would start to see worship as a lifelong growth in connecting to God. And, when I was in Baltimore and I was in my mid 30s, worship music was my lifeline while we were going through kind of a transitional period in our lives. And I look back at that and think, if I did not have worship music during that time, I don't know where I would have been because that's what centered me. And I feel like I'm in a new place like that today, And so part of the genesis for this was some of the things that I felt like God was doing in my life that flowed out of his ministry among us, that I think all of us at Grace have said, yeah, I mean, we're in an exciting new place in worship.
Yeah. How maybe did some of your background or some of the ways you think about worship impact the way that maybe you wrote the devotionals or did some of those things? And what's your hopes for people that are engaging with that part of it, even after the sermon series is over with?
Yeah, the devotionals started out of this. I was kind of just battling with this idea of, people oftentimes on Sunday mornings will say worship was really good today. And I know what they mean. They're just saying thank you and wanting to have a conversation about worship. But I felt like it was getting so compartmentalized to Sunday morning and to a certain time on Sunday morning, that worship was in this little bitty, you could hold it in your hand and it was good. Check. I'm going to go back to my life and maybe I'll find God or I'll see God or I'll have godly conversations, but I don't see that I'm worshiping throughout my week or throughout, different relationships and opportunities. And so I started writing really to kind of push myself and reminding myself that it's not just Sunday morning. It's not just when you're singing, but you can worship God in so many ways. And kind of getting that line for me of, what does it mean to worship God? What does it mean to praise God? And just fleshing out those things into my life so that I wasn't, just worshiping on Sunday morning when it was my job. And I wanted to, address, things that people have said around our church, like, well, what if I don't sing well? And kind of demystify some of those things and, encourage them that they are just as capable and as beautiful of a worshiper as somebody who loves to sing or can play an instrument so it was kind of defining things for myself and also trying to encourage myself and others in just the whole process.
Yeah, I think that, and this has probably happened because of, the way Christian culture has changed, before my lifetime. And the idea of compartmentalizing worship to a genre of music rather than a lifestyle. And whether you're talking about like experiences that you maybe had in Baltimore or the way that you're, experiencing the way you see your own career, vocation, or calling as something that's different than just a specific thing that you're doing a specific time, a specific place, but it can be something that's so much richer than that.
Yeah, and one of the things we bring out in the book is some of the science-based studies on singing, and especially on corporate singing. So there's been these studies on what happens when people sing together. So there was a researcher that studied choirs all over Canada, and one of the things he found was that as choirs would sing together, certain things would happen neurologically in the brain. One of those things was the production of oxytocin, the brain hormone, the hormone that is the cuddle hormone, the love hormone. And he was saying that as these choir members would sing, oxytocin was produced, and they would feel this deep connection with each other as they were singing. Well, obviously that wonderful bit of scientific information applies to local churches. So we have I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of churches around our country alone. And presumably when people engage in corporate singing, there is that production of oxytocin creating loving, bonding feelings between the people who are involved in worship. The other thing that this researcher discovered was that as people sang together, that there was a synchronicity in their brain functions that could be measured. And so here we talk about, Ephesians 4, one Lord, one faith, one baptism. We have this objective unity, in the body of Christ with Christ at the head. And one of the things corporate worship does neurologically is it brings us into a place of unity where there's emotions connected, there's the truth that's being expressed in the song, and the ultimate desire is that God will be glorified. So not only do we have the Bible giving us these hundreds of commands to sing, but the God who gave those commands also embedded into us some brain chemistry that has all sorts of benefits to us. So, I don't have a great voice. Jared's got an amazing voice, but as I use the voice that God gave me, I'm going to be tapping into some of the benefits of that brain chemistry that allows me to feel unified with different people.
Yeah. So thinking about some of that and the the whys behind this and the project. Could both of you speak to some of the challenges that you faced trying to put this together? Either the writing or any aspect of it, and what those challenges looked like, and how it shaped the way you felt about the final product, so to speak.
Well, it's been a while since I was in school. So it's the longest document that I've worked on in my personal life in many years. So there was just the actual work part of it. But for me, I think that especially because personally I was, felt like I was following God's leading and just being obedient, and, didn't really understand why I was writing all these things. I was specifically writing about, what it was like to be gathered in worship and scattered in worship. And then literally weeks later, COVID comes, and why would you even be writing about gathered worship? That makes no sense. And I was like, this is just, dumb. And nobody's, it's not worth anything. And you're just, you're writing. And so then, God kind of worked that out and was like, well, maybe it's for this purpose, to encourage your local church in worship. And so as I kept going, I think that there was a lot of just doubt and follow through that, as a 40-year-old man, does your experience and the way that you have come to know God through these scriptures and through these types of worship, does it matter? And does anybody want to hear it? And, realizing that that wasn't the point for me. The point was to be just pleasing to God and just honest about, what he's taught me in my life, and hoping, that just being real about it, people would be able to maybe be encouraged themselves.
I think for me, I process through writing, and I learn through writing. So I write, 5,000 words a week, probably 40 weeks a year. Love it. I journal in addition to that. I just love to write. And so, a lot of times in my journaling, I feel like the Lord will bring to mind certain things that I've learned. He'll connect them to the Word, and then I will try to live those things out. And this is a little weird for people to think about, but I always try to be a month ahead in my messages. So, I've got a month's worth of messages that I planned ahead, and I do that because I want to be able to apply the things that I've written about, as opposed to going, this is my message for this week. I don't know anything about what I've just told you, but I want to really apply that stuff. And so, for me, part of this series on worship was me reflecting on the things that I have been learning and growing into as Jared has been here, and God has significantly, done great things within our worship. He's done good things in me as a result of it. And so, one of the things we talk about, is personal worship in chapter 2. And my personal worship gets enhanced the more I excel in corporate worship. So I feel like corporate worship is a training ground for me to be a better private worshiper. But the better private worshiper I am, the more heart I bring into my corporate worship. Right. So there's a wonderful circular way that feeds into each other for me. And I think that's really true I think that's really the biblical paradigm, that I go as a young believer, I learn the worship songs, I inculcate those into my life. I begin to worship privately in those. I come back to corporate worship. I'm now more passionate about what I'm singing. I just think that's the paradigm. I think it's the biblical paradigm. I think David reflects that wonderfully in Psalm 63. And so we talk about private worship, in there, but also the importance of being involved in corporate worship.
Yeah, speaking to the fact that having people know that you're preparing a month ahead. I mean, I think a similar thing with the way that you're running the devotionals. God's challenging you guys in the moment through those things, and I think that if as pastors or leaders, if you weren't being challenged in those ways, and God wasn't pushing you in those ways, then the impact that you'd be able to have on others would probably be diminished, and it wouldn't be
Sure.
as great. And so the being able to admit that I'm growing in this way or in this skill, and I'm learning how to be able to do these things, and especially right now during the turmoil of COVID, we're all learning how to.
And speaking of COVID, there were times where only the three of us were in the worship center when we were doing the recording, and so. I know that it was hard on you to lead worship, because nobody was in the auditorium. You knew people were going to be watching online. So, and you were running around doing the tech stuff. So I was the lone worshiper in the worship center. And I mean, there were times where, okay, I was in the moment, I had my arms raised. I was in the moment. And, it was ministry to me during this really, really crazy, chaotic time. And I think, in a lot of ways that stretched the three of us
For sure.
into realizing that, part of worship in the new, what's going to becoming the new normal, is that there are people who are deeply blessed by receiving the worship that we do, but they receive it online in their living room or their den or wherever it is. And they're engaging with the Lord because they've told us that. They told you that, I know. They're engaging with the Lord in significant ways. And so I think part of our learning, speaking for myself in the context of you guys, our learning is that, God is really expanding our vision for what he can do when things get crazy and things get shut down.
Yeah. So to think about that, camp on that a little bit more, what this has been out for a little while. What are some of the things that you guys have heard, or what are some of the things that have happened after this that have really encouraged you to think about this is something that was definitely a God moment, or something that God is using either in your own lives or in the lives of other people that you've heard?
I mean, just the other day, somebody sent me a message, and they were just explaining that they had kind of a time of personal worship, and were bowing before the Lord, and had never done that in their house. They'd never gotten on their knees and prayed and just ascribed to God his goodness in their life. And so they were just, kind of telling me how transformative that was for them, and how it changed the entire perspective of their day, of how they were doing with their kids. And to me, that's like that kind of, story is like, well, that was all worth it, because, I've had so many of those in my life that have really shaped me. And it's the culmination of all those experiences with God that really shaped me into the man that I am now. And so if I can, just remind somebody, hey, you can bow in your closet, you can do these things, and it encourages them to do that, then, man, that's so worth it for me.
Well, one of the things we have in here, that we have takeaways, and some of the takeaways are things like that. We talk about using your body in worship, whether it's bowing or lying, prostrate on the floor, and arms out, and so I think people have used those takeaways to try things that may have been out of their comfort zone previously. One of the other things that I've been really encouraged about is thinking about moms and dads of young kids, and how singing to young kids is a form of worship that trains and mentors those young kids. So, I just think we live in the best day ever for being a grandparent, because my kids, send us videos. And so one of my best videos are when my daughter will send me videos of her singing to her infant son or daughter. And then that little son or daughter, my grandchild, is mouthing those words, trying to do something with voices and things like that. And I'm thinking, okay, so this is where worship begins, And so the last time I got a video from my daughter, I've watched that so many times. But yeah, I had a memory. And my memory was that my mom did the same thing for me. And she would pray with me before bed, and she had songs that she would sing. And I'm thinking, this worship thing can be a generational thing.
Yes.
Where we sing to our kids, we give them a vision for what worship is about. They then do that to their kids, because music is there's an amazing, there's a pre-linguistic beauty to music that we appreciate before we know how to talk. And I think if parents can learn or catch a vision for instilling worship into their kids from infancy, that has a profound impact, I think, on their discipleship as they grow older.
Yeah, a lot of engaging with God, especially when you guys are talking about it in these ways, like through worship, it's developing these habits, right? And if you think about anything like spiritual formation, spiritual disciplines, and how I learn how to engage with God, it's just about building habits, and finding ways to do things that are outside of my normal habits or my normal comfort zone. And, you might, have some of those habits or things on a Sunday morning, but it might be during the week. And, being able to engage with something like this and then see, well, what kind of habits, disciplines can I, learn or build or engage on? I think that it not only helps you, as a person, as an individual, but like you said, it becomes an impact on others, those around you, and whether that's directly or indirectly. And so, I think that for people that are listening, I mean, if there are things like that have shaped you too, like I know that some of you have shared some of those things, but continue to share with us the ways that this is shaping you and just building you. What have been some of the, for you too, what have been some of the surprises, the things that happened that you didn't expect to happen through this? I know, when you engage in a project, or if you're embarking on something, or even I'm sure as you're preparing for a sermon series, you maybe have a lot of expectations, but there might be some things that happen that you didn't expect, that obviously can only happen through the Spirit working in the midst of those situations. So have you guys experienced any of those things?
I didn't really, I think kind of going back to what you said a few minutes ago about, worship has become such a genre and such a thing. And so I'm so glad, we put all of our worship songs on Spotify, and worship music is more creative and more accessible and better than it's ever been, and all these different things. But, I was surprised at how much I had kind of, my understanding of worship had maybe dimmed a little bit. And I had kind of fallen into the trap of, we use these words to define things. And so we talk so much about praise and worship, time of worship. I'm not a worshiper. And it all is like been kind of narrowed into this. Well, I don't like this kind of worship style. And I had even kind of started to close in on that a little bit. And so that it really, helped push me to kind of redefine for myself what it meant to worship in general. And I was glad to, have to challenge myself as the worship leader to, just think about things in a different way, in a fresh way, realize that there were things, that I haven't done in a long time. And that God was clearly like, "Hey, Jared, why aren't you doing this?" Because, and remembering that even though my worship is all for him and focused on him and everything's about him, there are things that intrinsically happen to me, like you were talking about the singing, like it renews me and remakes me from the inside out and literally changes everything that I am about a person. But it's all dependent on how available I think worship to God is, or how the different ways I can do it. And I had sequestered that so much in my life that parts of me weren't growing, I think, the way that God wanted them to. And so that was not what I expected. I was just like, write some good devotionals, encourage some people, not, run into a wall, but it was good because it required me to grow.
Yeah, doing some of the research for this, one of the things I think I realized was that we are living in what is definitely the golden era of worship. Like in human history, there's never been a time where it's so possible to excel in worship. Up until David wrote a lot of the Psalms. What would you use? I mean, you had your own little songs, but the Psalms standardized worship for the people of Israel. Well, now we're there in the biggest way possible, where you can get a song like Waymaker that I think was written in Asia, right?
Yeah, it wasn't here.
And so we're benefiting from worship that has that international multicultural influence, and we are in the golden era of worship in every way. But the danger of that is you can become complacent. You can go, I'm not sure that I like that as much as I like this, and I got my own little pet ideas for what I like, and it's like, wait a second, the big picture is that we got to seize the privilege of living in this time, and find joy in the fact that we have a multiplicity of worship styles that we can choose from. The other thing I think is really cool is that somebody can come to Oklahoma from Texas, California, Vancouver, Maine, New York, and they'll probably know some of the songs that you're singing because of the way CCLI works and the way there are some worship songs that everybody's going to know because of the way all that works. And so that too is a benefit.
It is.
And so, I think seizing the day and really embracing the gifts that God has given to us is far better than going, my style preference is not quite that. I think we become like connoisseurs of worship as opposed to participants in kingdom and worshiping the King.
Yeah. You definitely can run the risk, and it's especially true when it comes to things like music, where you become a consumer, rather than a participant in something like that. And when it's all about being fed, and the ways that someone can make me comfortable in whatever way. Maybe it's the way that just a Sunday service is laid out, or maybe it's the things that are happening. If someone's doing this next to me, I don't think that I can, sing this song, or, it makes me uncomfortable if someone's, in the back dancing or whatever. But, God's calling people to engage with him in a way, and not just to sit there as a passive consumer of music in general. And so, I think being able to think about it in those ways and to be challenged in those ways, and having to learn how to do those things from home or in person with a mask on or something, that's challenging the way people are seeing some of those things. And for me personally, I don't like to talk about too much of me personally, because it's not about me, but learning how to to worship and continue to worship when so much of my attention is split and divided, and on a Sunday morning, or when it used to be on a Thursday night, and you mentioned me running around. People can't see, but I'm singing underneath my mask.
but you think about this though. I mean, as our pastor of online ministries, you're facilitating things online, and you're facilitating things online in a way that allow people to participate. So when you write something, on the Facebook feed or whatever, I mean that's part of the process, inviting people into community, and it's this all works together synergistically. You talk about worshiping, with our body. One of the things people at Grace sometimes who are new to Grace are surprised about is why do we light candles to celebrate answered prayer? And part of the reason is so that we notice, oh yeah, God did answer that prayer for me. And then rather than just noticing and go, okay, yeah, I noticed it, getting up out of our seat, going and lighting a candle is a way of saying, God, you're really good, and you did answer this prayer, and I worship you and I love you. And we're hoping that people at Grace will go, hey, I noticed you lit a candle. I mean, tell me a little bit about the story about that answered prayer. Because we if we're just sitting and doing nothing, we're not getting the benefit of the body that God made us. But if we are doing things like raising our hands, or getting up and lighting a candle to celebrate answered prayer, we're doing things with our body that bring added passion to what's going on inside our soul.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that people will always continue to grow in those ways and be challenged in those ways, especially if you come from a tradition where that's so much harder to do, or it's harder to change the way you're seeing that, especially if the style of the music or the way that the service is laid out is different. And so, I appreciate that we're able to bring people from a variety of traditions and backgrounds, and attempt to do something corporately that God calls us to do. and so I think that that's great, and my hope is after this series is done that people are challenged in those ways, and as people continue to engage with something like this book, that only continues to grow. Real quick, I figured that it would be appropriate. Are there, as you guys were writing this and working on this, are there certain people you guys would like to give a shout out to or acknowledge, to say, I mean, yes, obviously the brunt of this happened because of God and the obedience that you guys had to write these things and to prepare these things. But, could you speak a little bit to the people that, in whatever way to make space available or to do whatever that help facilitate this project?
Yeah, it's super easy for me. Thanks to my wife, who read and reread things a million times for me, but also I'm super thankful for Lane, because she, we're built differently. She loves to sing and worship, but I see her worship and her examples of worship in different ways, and it's refreshing for me. I also would want to thank, I had, a handful of we called them music ministers back in the day. But Chris Womack was one, and Ralph Gibson was one, that they gave me the gift of knowing that worship was more than just singing or singing well or playing, and really encouraged me in that whole process. And so I've always been thankful to me that they gave it away, that worship to them wasn't something that they did up on a platform and hoped everybody, got involved in, but they actively gave that to me. And the thing you were saying about singing to kids, I love that music is so tied to our memory too, that we can remember things by the songs we listen to when we're there. And so, my parents, I thank them for taking me to church. And I can remember certain Sundays, we did mostly hymns in the Baptist church when I was young. But I can remember certain Sundays, singing How Great Thou Art and As Well With My Soul, and my mom, crying and being touched in worship. And those moments are like just so solid in my mind that I knew something special and awesome was happening. And so I'm just thankful, that my parents started to instill that thing in me.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, my wife Cindy is a worshiper, and one of the high points of my week is that I get to worship with her. At least one service every week on Sundays, and I have just I've been inspired and encouraged by the way she worships. It is really neat for me to see that, and then how she brings that spirit of worship into our marriage and into our family. I love that. My daughter Sarah is a worship leader in Seattle, and whenever I start talking to her about the subject of the kingdom of God and worship, I'm always saying, hang on a second, I need to get a pen and a piece of paper, and I'm always writing notes down because of what my daughter Sarah says, because it's wise. It's a lot of wisdom there. And then my other daughter, we stayed in their Airbnb when I was writing this. And the great thing for me was writing and going down, hanging out with the grandkids, getting energized, going back up and writing. Oh, that was great. That was like the perfect writing environment for me.
That's fun.
But in a lot of ways, my journey really began with my mom singing to me when I was a kid. So guess what my habit was when my kids were little? I sang, and each of my kids had a song, and I can be with one of my kids, and we'll be singing that song, and I'll look over because that's our song, And so my family's played a pretty powerful role in me being a lover of worship.
Yeah. And I'm going to, let you guys know there are people like Daniel Nettleton who did some things. And I know as far as like the editing goes, and I think that Cindy, looked over some things, and Richard Oliver, did this cover. Awesome. And awesome with the artwork, and I think it captures a lot of what you guys are trying to convey.
We had a lot of people say that cover makes me want to buy the book. Just I'm picking that book up.
and so to you guys, and to your guys' family, special shout out to you. And if you are listening to this and you heard your name, you should comment down below and just let people know that this wouldn't have happened without you, because every part of it is important to it, because these things don't happen in a vacuum.
And I think both of us would say,
for sure,
thank you to you, because the technical magic that you work is just hugely appreciated. Week to week, and especially on Sundays.
I was a soundboard more than anything else, and made sure that some of the logistics were taken care of, and I just felt like it's something that if this is something that I feel like the church can benefit from, and that the people in this congregation can grow from, I'm going to do whatever I can to facilitate that and make that happen, and to make it something, that's done with excellence, and that has the look and the feel to it that, we're asking people to invest in this, and not just invest their time, invest their money. And I want that to be something that's well worth it, well spent. And so, to kind of start to wrap things up, for people who they've made it this far, and maybe they're either still on the fence or they're thinking maybe this is something that I need to invest in. What would be some final thoughts or final words that you guys would have to say to the people that are like listening, thinking about engaging with something like this book?
Our destiny is worship. In heaven, Revelation 5:9. We're going to have regular times of worshiping the risen Christ, and hopefully, what this does is it sets people on a journey that prepares them for something that will be super exciting throughout eternity. If we get excited about the upcoming football game or basketball game, our encounters with worship in heaven are going to be that excitement times who knows what.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully this gets people launched into a pattern that is eternal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say to you all, if you're willing to spend $5 on a Frappuccino at Starbucks, or you're willing to, spend $10 on something from McDonald's, then this would be a much more sound investment, not only for your spiritual life, but also probably for your health as well. And this is something that I think, it's not limited to a season, because if we're called to worship, we're called to worship, like you said. It's not just in the here and now. It's not just in the sermon series, but it's something that we're called to engage with in eternity. Mm-hmm. And it's something that we continually will grow in and learn to develop, and God will continue to challenge us in those ways. And so, if you're listening and you're thinking, or maybe the Spirit's prodding you in a way to think, maybe I need to learn how to worship in a new way, in a fresh way, mm-hmm. or maybe God's just wanting to challenge me in some of the thought processes that I have or the habits that I've developed. Pick this up. I've been amazed. We've shipped these things all over the country, to all sorts of different places, different states. And the more of these that we're able to get out, the more flexible or creative we're going to be able to be with the way that we make this available long term, because this is something that, for me personally, I don't want it to just last through a sermon series. I want it to be something that is accessible and available for people.
And right now, it's not available on Amazon. Mm. It's just available on our website. And you've done a great job, with that button. You click Enthroned, mm-hmm. and you can pick it up on our website.
Yeah.
No Kindle version yet, no Audible version yet. It's only on the website. And so.
Yeah. And, we're thinking about those things, and we're looking at those things about how we can do more. But I would say kind of like, this will be like the legacy piece. There'll never be one that's exactly like that's these. Right. And I believe that you can also grab these, in the description of this video, and maybe even in the show notes of the podcast. There'll be links to go directly to the form to pick one of these up. If you have any questions or thoughts or concerns about how to get one of these, we're shipping them. People are coming into the office and picking them up. I mean, we're being pretty flexible. We're trying to make it as easy as possible. And if you guys are still listening, I just want to say again, thank you. I want to say thank you to you two for putting the time into this. It took, a lot of time. You talk about being a month ahead. I mean, we spent a lot more than just a month working on this and getting it ready, not just writing it, but being able to, do the artwork and have the things printed and the forms ready so people could buy them. And so, this was a labor of love. And, for those of you that have been impacted by this, keep sharing those ways it has, or maybe even consider buying a book for someone that someone that you love. I know we've shipped a few of those where people felt inclined to send this to someone that they knew because they thought that they could benefit from something like this. And so, thank you again for, liking these videos, commenting on them, sharing them. It's been super awesome to get to do these videos, whether it's devotionals or, these longer like podcasts. And, just make sure if you're watching, if you're doing these things, to do all the different stuff, like, comment, subscribe, give us, reviews, whether that's on Facebook or on, the podcast platforms that you're listening to us on, so that other people can start to see these things and engage with us, not just in the building, but engage with us online, because we're trying to find new ways and think of things to do to just increase the engagement as people's lives continue to be disrupted. We're wanting to find ways that we can engage with you and help you encounter God in fresh new ways. And so, we just want to thank you again for listening. And if you have any questions, or if you want to find out more about what we're about, you can go to our website, gccbartlesville.org, and you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at gccbartlesville. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you real soon.